Hello, welcome to Video Game Podtimism, the Optimists video game variety show where two best friends, and maybe some more people, talk about the wonderful world of gaming. Before anybody says anything... also my name is Chase, hi. Let me do this. I have to wait for the riff to hit to make this effective, so just bear with me.
No, it's okay.
Distinguished guests and gamers, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our two special hosts this evening. In this corner, we have the host with the most ink-stained intensity, the sultan of storytelling, the bard of breaking news. Brace yourself for a barrage of brilliant, brainy banter. This relentless raconteur does not just dance with deadlines, he spars with the stories, throwing jabs of journalistic integrity and hooks of heart-stirring narratives. Ira Glass who? This is Noah Hertz.
Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Let's go.
Wow.
In the next corner is the public radio prodigy who pirouettes through the airwaves with the finesse of a frequency-foraging virtuoso. Get ready for an auditory escapade like never before as we welcome the radio raconteur with a perchance for pirates and pixelated quests. Our podcast paragon, the One Piece pundit with an ocarina in hand. It's Tori Dominguez Peak.
Wow, this is incredible.
This is really incredible.
You do this for all of your guests?
So far, it's
Wow.
a curse that I've laid upon myself. I've got one more paragraph. So whether you're a Titus lover, a Straw Hat sympathizer, or a Hyrule historian, please welcome the Press Start crew for a symphony of gaming insights, anime anecdotes, and audio allure. It's not just a podcast, it's a journey through pixels and beyond, guided by the Gen Z maestros of the gaming galaxy. And remember, in the realm of Press Start, we don't just play the games, we report the news, goddammit. So let's press start and let the gaming gala begin. Video games, soft fade.
The news. So what do you do? Are you recording your screen there and capturing all that? Okay, you're gonna add that in post. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately I've cursed myself in this way that a big part of this podcast is showing and listening to audio at the same time, but I haven't figured out quite how to record my screen into Audacity. So I just have to make it sound. I just have to make it sound good later.
One of my favorite my brother and me bits for ages was like when one of them would have like a soundboard they would use. And now that I have used audio editing, I'm just like, how the fuck did they do that?
I have no idea how they make that work. It's been a mystery for me for like years at this point. Hello and welcome. Thank you both for coming to do this podcast.
Hello.
This is a treat. Thank you so much.
This is incredible.
Yeah, I said a lot of words there, but I feel like I didn't actually introduce you guys. Would you be comfortable doing just like a, hey, here's our deal?
Please.
Yeah.
Yes. Tori, why don't you tell people what our podcast is?
Yeah, Noah and I are co-hosts of a show called Press Start, where we report the news on games every week, what we've been interested in, and then we talk about what we've been playing, and we delve into not just games, but also sometimes current events, shows, movies, books, and kind of what it means to be a person in the world and in the society.
Yeah, I feel like it needs to be said that like we don't really do a whole lot of news reporting. We rely on the fantastic games journalism that floats around
we're
in the
not
world.
we're sharing links to IGN in the Google Doc.
Yes, but the two of us are people who like work in the news space, and our third co-host Nathaniel also works like in news. So we really enjoy being able to pivot from our day jobs, which requires that we pay attention to, current events and very serious things that are going on, and in the evening talking about video games we've been playing and focusing on like equally serious news in the video game space.
Yeah. One of our early taglines in the show is that we're not games journalists, we're journalists who happen to game. Mm-hmm. So that's our show.
As corny as that is accurate. But
yes, yeah. That's awesome. I will say, just like personally, the thing that got me started listening to y'all in the first place was just the sheer pitch of a Gen Z podcast about video games.
That too.
Because I feel like and y'all have said this before too, that the millennial dude voice is overrepresented, which I realize the irony of me saying that, but like still it is a very common perspective. And so it was like pretty fascinating, at least initially for me, to be like, hey, I'm very interested in what people who are not like didn't grow up in the same context think about the same shit that like I love. So that was generally what brought me over to y'all in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because like that was one of the motivating factors when we were first deciding to do something like this, because like Tori, I know you and I have both talked about this quite a bit, but like I don't know, so much of the early touchstones, like we've both been on the internet for like a long time, and we both, as people who really enjoy video games, like I spent a lot of time on like game FAQs, and I spent a lot of time on YouTube when I was growing up. But like I found that like I could never really relate to like the angry video game nerd, or like a lot of people of that oeuvre, that generation, who built a platform on like, you guys remember this NES game that was like really hard and really annoying? And like, I had an NES in my household because like my dad bought an NES at one point, but like I was a GameCube kid. I was an N64 kid. Like I couldn't relate to that. And as I've gotten older, I found that, and that is definitely changing a lot, thankfully in part, and also just because like that's good to have different voices in that space. But even still, like that generation and that age group is still definitely overrepresented in like the big games journalism space. And I think the two of us were always kind of annoyed by that.
Yeah, I feel like rightfully so. There's so much of it.
Yeah, there is a lot of it. When I was growing up, we had like the G4 channel. Like it just like appeared on like DirecTV one day. And like, I spent copious hours. My brother had a TV in his room, and we spent copious hours watching shit like Ninja Warrior and like lots of like Japanese game shows. But also there was like gaming commentary on there, and there was always this like, I'm not saying they're all like this, but there was just always like, there's like a round table or a couch or like two beanbags, whatever, and it's like three dudes and like one hot lady.
Yes.
And it was Olivia Munn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's true. And like, I don't know, it just like never really sat right with me. And she was kind of allowed to like be hot and say some like pithy one-liners, but like, it seemed really weird to me that like you had like to be a respected gamer girl, which like that's very loaded in of itself. You had to like, there can only be one of you at a time, and you had to be like really hot. And I was just like, that's not my experience. That's not right. And I think we also grew up in a time when like cozy games and like gaming fandoms on Tumblr and like the rise of things like Animal Crossing became more apparent. So this whole like, ooh, the one girl who games just like didn't make sense because like all of my girlfriends had Pokemon faces. Like it just didn't register with me.
Yeah, it feels like a hangover from like the marketing of like the 90s and 2000s of that era. Like it was just so tailored towards like initially kind of like youngish boys and then eventually teenage boys. And there was just really not a lot of consideration giving to like anybody else, not just like another gender, but like literally anybody else. And so, I also like grew up with G4, and at the time was just like, fuck yeah, dude, video games on TV. Let's go.
Fuck yeah, dude.
I mean, as a concept, it's great.
On my TV.
Dude, as a concept, fantastic.
Yeah, but like having seen some of the stuff on there, like more recently, I was like, yeah, there's definitely a lens to this that is a little bit more painful to witness in modern day.
No, oh my God. Like within the last year, there was this like random tactics RPG published by Japanese video game publisher Atlas that I heard of. I don't even know how I heard of it. It just like randomly came across my radar, and I was like, this looks cool, because the art for the game was done by the guy who did the art for like the early Shin Megami Tensei Persona games. And I was like, whoa, what is this game? How have I never heard of this? So I looked up on YouTube to see if there were any video reviews so that I could see like gameplay of it and people talk about it. And one of the first things that came up was like a G4 X-Play review of it. And I was like, well, this isn't my first choice, but like if it's the only thing that's going to come up, I'll click on it. And what I got was just like this incredibly racist review that was just like, it's another one of those games from Japan. It's another one of those fucking Asian games. Like it's so quirky and weird and Asian. And like there was definitely some more racist stuff than that in it too. And that's why like it's been like a goal of ours as we've been recording a podcast. Like we have guests on periodically on the show, and some of it, a lot of it, I will say, is just like an excuse to talk to people who we think are really interesting and like who we would want to be friends with. But like, it's been really important to us to like have a lot of women on the show and have a lot of queer people on the show, and like people who don't fall into like a particular gender binary, who are transgender or people of color, and like to elevate this people who have typically been marginalized from the space of like capital G gamer, but like have been there the whole time, you know?
Yes, yeah.
It's also super cool to talk to people who have like lived outside the US.
Yes, yeah, totally.
Lucy, I'm forgetting their last name, but the creator of the game One Night Stand, who like born and raised in the UK, lives in Germany, are one of our more recent episodes with Nadia Shemes, who lived in Palestine and now lived in the US and then now lives in Canada. Like, I think their perspectives are really interesting. So yeah, it's been an excuse to talk to cool people who wouldn't talk to me otherwise. Yeah.
What is a podcast? It's not an excuse to talk to cool people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of cool people, do y'all want to talk about some video games?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you kidding me?
Great. So normally during this part, we just talk about whatever we've been playing. So I want to open the floor to both of you. Talk about any of the shit that you're playing, relevant or not, or whatever.
So we did just drop an episode today about our 3-month Final Fantasy X # journey.
Yes. A very good episode, I will say. I've listened to that today.
Oh, really?
Thank you. I appreciate
Thanks.
that.
Yes.
And I'm still like thinking about it. It was a good time. I was just thinking about like what could have been done for me to have had a better time in that last like 20% of the game.
Yeah, it's kind of a slog there towards the end.
And to be honest, like all of my problems were just the fact that I didn't want to use a walkthrough. Like that's why I suffered so much throughout like all the cloister of trials. Like they're like, I'm sorry, like I'm dumb. Like I need a walkthrough. And I think like post-mortem review of Final Fantasy X, like given my walkthrough-less run, except for the very end, and I was like, I really need these fucking weapons. Like, let's pull up jegged.com. I made the best of it, and I really liked it. And I have 2 wolves inside of me, and wolf number 1 is like, you need to either play like Sea of Stars or like another Final Fantasy game or another like JRPG adjacent game. And then wolf number 2 is like, you need to just play like Mario Wonder and be like brain empty for like the next month.
Yes, yeah.
So that's where I'm at. Noah, where are you at?
I've also still been thinking about Final Fantasy X. I'm having that thing with Final Fantasy X where it's like, you know, when you finish reading a really good book and you like close it and you still have like book reading energy in you where you're like, well, I really enjoyed reading. I could read another book, but like you need time to process the book you just finished. I kind of still feel that way about Final Fantasy X, not because like, oh my God, I'm still sitting with it, but also because like I spent like several months of my life playing that game. I rolled credits on it and I was like, wow, I spent almost 60 hours playing that video game. And it was kind of the same feeling I got when I finally beat Persona 5 when I was in college, where it was like, I spent almost 100 hours with this video game. And it was like, the feeling is not like, wow, that's time I'm never going to get back. It's just like, this is like a piece of art, just like a thing that I spent so many hours of my life with. And I feel like with a lot of video games, especially RPGs, because they have a tendency to get a little long in the tooth, I reach a point with them where I'm just like, I like really want it to end. Whereas I don't feel that way with a lot of other media. And I don't feel that way with like every video game I play either. But like sometimes RPGs like that, it reaches a point at the end where it's like the numbers don't really mean anything anymore. And I'm just ready for it to be over with. So yeah, Final Fantasy X, I say that as if we didn't record a 2-hour long podcast that is mostly us saying positive things about that game. But
yeah. No, I agree. The book reading thing.
I was mostly traveling this past week, though. I went up to Philadelphia, New Jersey for a wedding. When I'm traveling, when I'm in travel mode, I either like bring my DS or my PSP with me to like embark on a long journey, or I just want like brain off games. And since I was traveling and having just come off of the high of a 60-hour RPG, I played a lot of Slay the Spire on the plane to and from Philadelphia. And man, it doesn't matter if you've put 100 hours into that game. It doesn't matter if you've put 2 hours into that game. It is just so fucking good. It's like,
amazing.
It's so good. It's like that boom of roguelike games that came. I don't know exactly when Slay the Spire came out. Like I know when I definitely started seeing it like on like the Steam recommended page and the Switch eShop and that kind of thing. But I know that there was
like 2019, I feel like is when that game dropped.
That honestly sounds later than I expected. But like
that was 1.0 to be fair. Yeah.
There's like that tidal wave of roguelike games where you get like Enter the Gungeon, and you get just like all of these different games that are kind of like taking that formula of, and I'm not even sure which thing popularized it. I know like The Binding of Isaac is a big one and pushing that forward. Yeah. But like Slay the Spire just does such a good job of making you feel like you've never quite beaten it in a way that like a lot of those roguelikes, like a Rogue Legacy is a good one, that it's like when you beat it, I didn't ever really feel like there was a reason to go back to it unless I was going to totally start over. Or like Spelunky. It's like once you get the true ending, it's like you can do a run or two, but it's like, why would you do a run or two? Like you've played this so much. Whereas Slay the Spire, there's like so many things even after you've like beaten it for each of the character types to just like go back and try to beat it at a slightly harder version, or beat it at a slightly harder version after that, or do the daily one that is randomized every time. Like it's just crazy how much of a well of game there is in that game. And since it's a card game and it's focused around deck building, like it sounds trite, but like no playthrough you play of that game is ever going to be the same as another playthrough you play of it.
Yeah. No, it's the shit. Spire. I'm also a deck building roguelike freak.
Yeah.
Just absolutely consume any of those games that I can possibly play. That was like the meme between David and I, like the first like year or so of Podtimism was just like, there's none of these that I won't play. I'll buy every single one of them and try any of them. And I think, yes, most of my interest in the genre came from Slay the Spire. It's so good. It's so amazing.
Because we're friends on like Nintendo Switch, and like I'm a weirdo who loves to watch what other people are playing. Like I love when I'm playing something and it's like Noah's playing Fortnite and I'm like,
Please don't look at how many hours I've played Fortnite, dude.
Please don't look at how many hours I've played Animal Crossing. But like,
yeah, all right, fair.
I've noticed that whenever we're like in between games, like we beat a game but we haven't committed to another one, I always see Slay the Spire pop up with you.
Yeah,
it seems like it's like your kind of like a bread and butter game. I admire people who have bread and butter games. Like my partner does this with Rocket League. Like if like you know, he plays a lot of games like in a serial fashion, but like in between them it's like Rocket League for a week, you know, and then on to the next game. And I wish I was one of those people, because in between games, I'm kind of in like a weird malaise. I just like scroll on my phone and then I read half a book and don't finish, and then I get back into playing a game. So I have not I need to figure that part of myself out.
You're laying in bed like a small Victorian child whose humors are out of whack.
No, literally, I'm like, I need to recover.
I got too much of the outdoor miasma.
I got poisoned by sin. Yeah.
Yeah, you did get poisoned by sin. Yeah, Slay the Spire for me is like, it is both something that I like to return to when I need like a comfort game. And I guess it is, now that you're pointing this out, kind of like my piece of ginger in between pieces of sushi. It's like I've finished a long game and I just need to like wash the crevices of my brain out with a deck builder. And like, it's funny you say that, Chase, about like you guys, like that unlocking deck builders for you. Like I've talked about this on our podcast before. Like my first brush with deck building games was when I was a kid, and I was like, oh my God, Kingdom Hearts 1 was so fucking cool. What comes next? And I played Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories and I fucking hated it. Yeah. Because I was just like, why can't I just press the X button or like press the confirm button to swing my Keyblade infinitely? Why do I have to use cards?
It's such a universal memory.
It is. And well, you know, maybe it's not. Maybe some children were just like way smarter and like better at cards than I was.
It wasn't me. I also was like, what the fuck, dude?
And like, I was like that until I was like a college student. And then one of my roommates, who's like a best friend of mine, sat me down and was like, I'm going to teach you how to play Magic the Gathering. And I was like, okay. And like, this is going to be such a fucking opaque reference. Have either of you read the Dark Tower series from Stephen King?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've read other King books though, like...
Okay, then you kind of get the King idea. At the very end of the first book in the Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger, the main gunslinger character, Roland, finally reaches this like evil wizard dude he's been chasing the entire book, and they sit down and just like smoke weed together, and he's just like, hey dude, I know you've been like chasing me the whole book, but like what if we just like smoked weed? But it's actually like mind expanding weed, and the cowboy, the trippy cowboy guy has like this moment where his mind is like knocked out of whack, and he like sees the entire shape of the universe, and it like kind of fucks him up. I kind of felt like that when I played Magic the Gathering for the first time.
Yeah, you're having like a turtle who carries the universe on his back moment here.
Fucking literally, I was like, I understand how deck builders work. It like unlocked a portion of my brain. And literally ever since then, like I still like Magic, and every other card game I pick up, I'm just like, how can I get into this in an unhealthy way?
I had this experience the first time not the first time, but like around the time I started playing D&D, which I was like kind of late to the game on. I started playing in like kind of my mid 20s, and I had like grown up with video games. And so this is maybe stupid to point out, but like so much of video games is just based on D&D.
Yeah.
Like just the base stats for like any RPG is mostly D&D based. And at least at the time, I feel like so much of the gaming industry was so focused on like just mechanical advancement. And so like for me, it was silly to want to play the pen and paper version. Like why would I play the shittier version of a video game? Which is like silly, of course, like D&D rocks. But at the time I was like, I could just play Final Fantasy X, dude. Like, what are you talking about? Why would I want to play a pen and paper version of this?
Final Fantasy X already has Orin in it, but paper paper D&D, I have to like make a guy who's like Orin. Yeah,
I have to convince someone to do Orin's voice for me. Which sucks. I want to play the video game. But I played D&D and like had the same moment of like my like brain blast sort of thing of, okay, I understand why this is cool, and B, why so many games have like based themselves off of this. Yeah. I was also like very bad at RPGs when I was younger. So like that also helped me be like, I should invest in Magic and not just hitting people. Yeah. For just to back up a second, I got stuck at the fight between like the Final Fantasy X party and Seymour when he first like starts saying like, I'm going to summon like his big shitty guy that he pulls out of hell. I like got stuck at that fight. I genuinely couldn't get past it when I was younger and was like, I guess this is the end of Final Fantasy for me. Like that's my canon run is that Seymour just whips our ass and that's the end of it.
It's so funny. I have met like 3 different people who are like, I lost it at Seymour. Like variations.
I think that's like a really critical moment as like somebody who gets into video games as a young person and then sticks with video games, though, to just like have your ass absolutely beat by something that is numbers based. Because like, like we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but like that was when we were recording, like the way video games were marketed for so long is like, whoa, you're a teenage boy. Don't you want to run fast like Sonic? When it's like, the reality is that so much of the history of video games is people going, how can I make ping pong on a computer screen? And then also, how can I replicate the feeling of playing D&D, because it's really hard to schedule all my friends to get in a room to play D&D with me. And like, that's video games. And obviously video games is more than that, but like so much of what we get from like experiences we play in games that come out in 2023, we owe to like nerds in the 80s who were like, all my friends are too busy, so how can I try to program D&D, you know? So shout out to them, honestly.
Yeah, huge shouts out to 80s nerds. What was the game that beat your guys' ass numbers wise when you were younger?
It was, this is tragic. It was Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, the DS one.
Hell yeah.
I got to the final boss. You're like in hell. Yeah. Or whatever. You and your little like chibi friends and your little Moogle. And like, it's like end game, and I just couldn't beat the final boss. And it was one of those like fuck you situations where like I resaved at the point of no return. So I couldn't like,
oh no.
And so I just had to like, I just stopped. And the thing is, like, I'm actually pretty impressed with myself because I played this when I was like 9. So the fact that I got myself to the final boss.
Yeah, that's shocking.
I just needed to not save and then progress. I should have just like, before saving at the point of no return, I should have just like grinded for like literally 2 hours max, and I would have beaten it, which makes it all the more tragic.
Oh man.
So I live close to where Limited Run is based in North Carolina. They have a they have a store here, called Limited Run Retail, and I go there like every so often just to see like what they have. They have a mix of like limited run stuff and also like retro games, and they've also started selling like retro video game guides. And they had a Prima strategy guide for that Crystal Chronicles game, and I almost bought it, even though I don't even own that game anymore, because I was just
to
like,
feel something.
Just to see how it ends. Yeah, just to feel something. So that was my first experience with getting my ass beat.
That era of games too, you were talking about like needing or wanting to not need a guide to beat Final Fantasy X. And like, I know it's possible. And there's a lot of games of that era that it's possible from. But like, I remember so much of like game design was just influenced by people, or maybe it was Prima who was pushing this, but like needing to buy a strategy guide to be able to even have a shot at beating a game was like totally necessary.
Yeah.
When me and my friends were like playing, or not even some of my friends, like the people I went to school with, not even my friends, when like Ocarina of Time was hot, I was known at school as a kid who had a strategy guide for Prima. And so like I would get like phone calls at my home, my place of rest, and they'd be like, "Hey, can I talk to Chase?" I'm like, and my dad's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And he gives the phone to me and he's like, "Hey dude," I'm like, "I haven't talked to you at school in like 6 months. How do you like, A, how do you have my phone number? But B, what do you want?" And he's like, "Dude, I'm stuck in Jabu Jabu. I need help."
Oh my God.
And that was like our way of getting through this shit. Because
you were just like game FAQs for your entire school.
Yeah.
But like a guy.
Instead of just a
guy. That's crazy.
I remember like when I was younger, I had the game guide for Pokemon Emerald on the Game Boy Advance, and love Pokemon Emerald. 3rd gen Pokemon's great.
It's great.
But looking back, I remember at the time being like there are puzzles in that game that require that you know Braille, and like
what?
I didn't know Braille. Like and the guidebook just had like, hey, here's the Braille alphabet in the back, and like you would come upon you'd come across a wall, Tori, that was like, it would be like a wall of things, and you click a little box, you'd press A, and a text box would pop up, and it would be dots, and then the Braille of those dots would spell out like, use HM cut, and you would just use cut on a wall that it does not look like you should use cut on, and then it would open up the next chamber, and this was how you got like Reggie Rock and those guys. And
oh my God,
at the time,
this is
like,
bonkers.
I would just use the strategy guide, but I remember like a few years later looking back and being like, why the fuck did they do that?
Yeah.
Were kids going to the library like checking out books on Braille?
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, I just find it unrealistic that like people would know how to do these puzzles. And it's possible that the game designers were making this as a way of like, here is the section for the absolute people. Not that like knowing Braille is weird, but like a kid who doesn't know Braille and would be like, I'm going to figure this out because I just have to bash my head against this wall to get everything in this fucking video game. Like, that's a possibility, but I find it much more realistic that like strategy guide companies were like, could you build in some just like truly heinous shit that like people could not get past if they wanted to, that we can like reveal to people?
I love the conspiracy theory energy of this, Chase. You're like, the games are hard because the guides lobbied them.
Yeah.
To make them
that's
harder.
My best guess, because I have no information about this. Like, absolutely zero actual hard evidence for either direction. It's the best I've got.
I've been thinking about it over here, and I want to share the game that kicked my ass. Chase, you specifically asked about numbers, and like, if I was going to be honest and share like the first RPG that really kicked my ass, it would probably be like the first Paper Mario, because like even as a kid, those numbers were small enough that I feel like I could have figured it out. But even an RPG that is tailored toward children does still expect you to reach a point where you're going to understand like inventory management in a way that as a stupid child, I absolutely did not. I think that's why I want to share this one, because this is the game that really kicked my ass for the first time. And it was because I didn't understand inventory management and like saving or like any of this stuff. And to set the scene, the year is 2003. The Lord of the Rings movies are so fucking hot, and everybody is just like EA has already made the hack and slash like Two Towers and Return of the King games. There was that one, the Third Age, I think that came out later, that was like just an RPG that was just Final Fantasy X, but Lord of the Rings. But somewhere in between there, the development studio Inevitable Entertainment, I didn't know that off the top of my head, I'm on Wikipedia right now, made The Hobbit for the PS2 and the GameCube.
Hell yeah. They sure did.
And I had the Hobbit for the GameCube, and this was like a weirdly faithful recreation of the book The Hobbit. And like I was not like really into Tolkien as a kid. My dad just was, so we had this game. And I remember it was an action adventure platformer, you know, so you're like swinging Sting and shit and like killing orcs or whatever, and you're like using his little walking stick to vault over things. And I remember it being a fun game, but I remember that I got stuck irreparably because I had saved before a boss fight and I didn't have any health potions. And I remember just like trying to beat this boss and being like, if I can just like figure it out, I can beat it. But it was like, it came down to like, no, you didn't manage your inventory right. And like, I think that kind of stuff is just as much a part of like the D&D-ness of so many video games as the numbers are, where it's like you need to know, and we're going to get into this a little more when we talk about the game that we played for this episode, I'm sure, but like you need to know when to use the potion and when you should maybe wait until after you save to use the potion. And that is not necessarily like a skill that I think children are born with.
No, they like lose one little section of health and they're like, oh, I want to be at full health, so I'm just going to use my potions now.
Yeah, and I think that kind of experience turned me into the type of gamer who is like, I get to the final boss fight and I'm looking at my inventory and I'm like, got all these items that I've been hoarding. Like, I guess I could use them now.
You have like 20 potions that are so ineffective for how high your health pool is now, and like 100 bananas and like something that you'd have no idea what even does, but like maybe you'll need it someday.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I didn't want to sell at the shop because it was worth a lot of money and that made me think it was valuable. So I should hang on to it.
Speaking of this conversation, my partner just texted me that he got our nephew a Super Mario Wonder for Christmas. This will be our nephew's first video game.
Oh my God.
Is this the nephew who's really into Sonic the Hedgehog?
No, I have two nephews. I have one who's really into Sonic the Hedgehog and one who like has been wanting a Switch, but hasn't expressed any interest in any particular IP, so I'm just like, Mario.
Yeah, you gotta set him up with like a real fastball over home plate, just an easy digestible Mario.
Yeah, we got Mario Wonder. My thinking is like, well, he's 7, so like he can be Yoshi and like not die. But I'm wondering what these kids' first games that will like beat their ass be. Like, I hope it's not Mario Wonder. I want to traumatize him. But like, is he gonna play Mario Wonder, like it, and then try to play Odyssey and then have a bad time?
I feel like this game fucking sucks.
Yeah. Or is it, do you think kids are had a bad time with like Breath of the Wild? I just wonder how this is going to progress to like the next generation.
Yeah. Huh.
I feel like they're like a lot of games are pretty accessible these days for like somebody who like maybe this is their first game or something like that. So I am curious which one's going to screw up the next gen hard enough for them to be good at video games again.
Yeah.
Speaking from like personal experience, I had a really hard time in like the like SNES era. I was born in 1990, and so like I was like 7 when like SNES was still pretty hot, and N64 was coming out around that time too. But like my parents didn't know like ass about video games, and so like I would just constantly be like, "Can I please like rent something from Blockbuster, dude?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, sure." But like I would get home and like be tasked with figuring out how to play like Final Fantasy, and I literally was like, I don't know that I can like read very well, and like that was enough of a barrier a lot of the time for me to be like, I don't know, dude, fuck Goof Troop, I don't really like this game because I don't understand how to play it. But like Mario is like just easy enough to be like, yeah, you just go right, man. That's good enough. That'll be all right. I
think a lot. I'm glad you mentioned like your parents not being into video games, because I think a lot about the fact that like a lot of my early gaming, and Tori, like I know you have a lot to say about this too, but like a lot of my early gaming stuff came from my dad, because he kind of missed the late 90s and the early 2000s. I was born in 98, so like when I was a kid, when I was 5, I got a GameCube for Christmas, and that was like a huge fucking moment for me. But like a lot of my early retro in quotation marks, education came from like the fact that my dad's Genesis was out a lot of the time, and like my dad's NES would come out every now and then. So like I played the early Sonic the Hedgehogs as a kid, and I played like Duck Hunt and that kind of shit. And this is going to sound morbid, but I promise it's not. But like when my parents divorced and like a lot of my dad's video game knowledge then went to my dad's house, but I still wanted to like play video games a lot. I was always really interested in the fact that like my mom didn't really see the point for a long time when I was a kid. And she was just like, why do you want to play Super Smash Brothers Melee so fucking much? And I was just like, I don't know, man. Like, I want to play Super Smash Brothers Melee. And like,
shit's good, Mom.
Like later on, my little sister got a Nintendo DS. And I think she mostly got a DS because I had a DS, and she was like a little kid and was jealous and wanted a DS. So she got one, and she got the Hannah Montana video game for the DS. And my sister, my sister was way too young to be playing video games. Like, just could not wrap her head around it because this game had a lot of reading, and my sister could not read at the time. So she basically like gave my mom the Hannah Montana game. It was like, beat it for me so I can watch you. So like my mom's first, well, it's not my mom's first, my parents like played Diablo 2 together on the PC for some reason, but like my mom's first like post my dad experience with games came from like my sister making her play a DS game. And then I remember after she beat that, she like earnestly sat down like 10-year-old me and was like, I really kind of liked that experience, even though it was a bad game. What game should I play next? And at the time I was playing Pokemon Diamond, and I was like, you should play Pokemon Pearl.
Oh, wow.
And this was like 100% selfishness. You know, it was like, if she gets Pearl, I can get the Pokemon that I can't get in Diamond. But what I ended up getting out of that was like a parent who fell hard for Pokemon, and like then up through being a high schooler, like when the new Pokemon games came out, like my mom and I would each get them. And so like, I'd go play with my friends and stuff, and then like I'd come home and my mom and I would like talk strategy about like gym bosses and stuff. So it's like the fact that games are, a lot of games at least, especially Nintendo games, are trying to be more accessible, not just to kids. Like, I always get a little annoyed when the conversation turns to like, and this mode has this for kids, because I think it's kind of reductive, you know? Like, it might be for like mom who's never played a game before, or like older sibling who missed the past 4 generations but really wants to play with their nephew, or that kind of thing. And I think the one voice that was largely left out of like games journalism in the casual game boom of the Wii era was like the person who thinks it's cool that casual gaming is getting more people into gaming. And like, lo and behold, now we have more people into gaming than there ever have been.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Both my parents played games. My dad was like an Atari kid, and my mom was very like an 80s nerd. Like, she had friends who were into D&D. She had Super Metroid. She had Castlevania. And then when I was growing up, like, it was interesting because I never played any games with my mom, but I watched her play them. And these were like PS1, PS2 era, like Resident Evil 4, Silent Hill 2. Like, she played a lot of horror. And there were some parts that were too scary where she's like, go back to your room. Like,
damn.
Like, like Pyramid Head came out. She was like, go back to your room. And I was like, okay.
There's so much gory shit in Resident Evil 4 that like is probably fine. But like, dude, the moment Pyramid Head shows up, I'm like, we got to clear out of here. Like, there should be no children in the room right
like
now.
For real. And then as I got older, she and my brother would play stuff together. So I would just watch them play stuff together. And so it was a lot of like Bethesda, so like Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout stuff. And so like I developed an appreciation for RPGs via that. And then the Nintendo like hand-me-downs I got. And then horror, it's so interesting because I grew up watching like a lot of horror, but like I still haven't played much of it myself. So yeah, that's it's sort of interesting.
That's so cool. This is honestly making me very relieved because, again, the voices that I hear on the internet are of my age. And I think like I was about to say my story is not for the faint of heart. I was about to do a Titus thing, but like what I'm getting to, this is my story. I was a gamer in the 90s. No, oh my God, dude. I can't do this character. What I was going to say is that I feel like that story is kind of common of like, my parents don't know ass about video games. And like, I will, with just one little asterisk real quick, my dad loved Doom. My dude was crazy about Doom.
Okay,
That's
dads
awesome.
love Doom. That's true. Like my dad, dads love Doom.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
It's like fast enough. I don't understand, but yeah, it's like catnip to 90s dads. But I'm like looking at like, you know, maybe like starting a family in the next like year or so. And I'm so concerned about how do I present this to a kid and not just look like a fucking dweeb, because I want to have a Smash Brothers partner or a Mario Kart bud. But like, I feel like it could so easily be presented as like, oh, it's like dad's nerd shit, you know, like how stupid and weird. But hey, good call out on sending kids out for horror, because I really don't want to stop playing like Resident Evil and Silent Hill.
Yeah.
But like, there's a path here. There's a way to do this.
It's fun. Like, so I was saying, like, I have 2 nephews, and so one is getting Mario Wonder, and then the other one is 5. So I don't think I can give him Mario Wonder. I think that's a little too hard. So I think I'm gonna get him like isn't like the Let's Go Pikachu.
Oh yeah,
like one of those.
Those games are good too.
Yeah. What's really funny, Chase, is my 5-year-old nephew. This is like the most. Every time I tell people this, like their brain explodes. My 5-year-old nephew loves Mario and Sonic, but that's because he watched the Sonic TV show on Netflix and the Mario movie. Like those are his entries into that video game IP, is like the Chris Pratt movie and the Netflix show.
That's so crazy.
So like future Chase's kid could get into Mario ostensibly from the movie or whatever non-video game Mario content, and then that's the gateway into playing Mario Kart with his dad. So
future little Chase is gonna watch the Onimusha anime and be like, dude, please tell me what the origin of this cool anime is, and I'll point them to this episode, maybe.
There you go.
Let me just real quick before we go all full Onimusha, I did want to mention that I've played and beat, and I'm sure I'll talk about this a little bit more in another episode. But I played and beat Earthbound recently, and I know that that's like a good game for both of you.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
I listened to the first couple Press Start episodes that came up for you almost immediately, Noah. And I also listened through the episodes where you were playing through it, Tori, and like both of you had a pretty good time with this game.
Yeah, it was great.
I also thought it was amazing. Like this is another game that I tried to play when I was a kid, and I was just like, I don't fucking get it, man.
Yeah.
Like especially when you're like wandering around and like going to Onet, and like you get up to the little meteor and they're like, go back home. I'm like, where is the video game? How do I play this thing? Like what is the? Because like when did Earthbound even come out? It was
like
a long time ago.
93 or something.
It was like shockingly late into the Super Nintendo's lifespan.
Yeah, North America was 1995, which is probably about when I was playing.
That's pretty wild. It first came out in 89, but I believe that was Japan, and then in America it came out in 95. It's a 6-year difference.
Well, that was Mother 1, so that was the precursor to Earthbound that was never actually released over here until like the Wii U era. But the wild thing about Earthbound is that like Earthbound releases in a world where like Final Fantasy VI has already been out for like a full calendar year. And so it's like Square has just been raising the bar for RPGs. And then Nintendo puts out this game that like graphically just cannot hold a candle to the shit that Square is putting out. I'm really interested in knowing that like you tried playing this as a kid though and bounced off of it.
I couldn't do it. Yeah, like I just didn't understand. Like partially that's just like I can't read very well, so I don't understand that like somebody is telling me like, okay, go back home now. And this is another game that when I was playing through it this time used a lot of a guide, because there's a lot of shit in Earthbound where it's like, okay, so you remember that like place you went to 10 hours ago? You need to go back there and talk to this one guy, and he'll give you an item that can then progress you, which like is fine for me. I don't mind doing that, especially with like, you know, very good guides out there, but I never would have been able to figure that out as a kid. Like there's just no world where that was possible.
Yeah.
I also like at the time I had like a Game Genie, which was this like cartridge that you would place into the SNES and then place the SNES cartridge for whatever game you're playing on top of the Game Genie. And you could like put cheats into the video game. And so I would constantly try to skip to the end of Earthbound just to like see it, because that was one of the cheats you could use, and just got like my ass beat because I didn't know that like Psy was magic or something. I would just try and attack Gigas and that would be it. I would just like lose every time. So like for most of my life I've been like, I don't know that I like this game very much. Like little me thought that the first person battle view was dumb, and like I can't fucking see I can't see the enemies, dude. Like I can't see my guys. Like, what is this? Final Fantasy owns. Like, why am I doing this? But like this time, I don't know, for whatever reason, it just clicked a lot more. And it was so good. This is a really good video game, y'all. Shocking no one, but like, damn.
I wonder, like, I feel like Earthbound is the kind of game that really hits you differently depending on where you're at in your life. And like, as somebody like in your 30s and like wanting to start a family, like how did it hit for you, like playing as these kids, but then having these moments where like you go and talk to like their parents and they're like, or like the moments when you call your dad, like did that make you misty-eyed too?
Man.
Like,
Damn.
I think, so much of it definitely like hit in a different way than it probably was intended to, but just like would have hit me at the time. A lot of it is like on first blush, I'm just like, God, this is a bad place for a kid to be wandering around, like just beating the shit out of like crazed adults with a bat.
Zombies wandering the streets of New York City. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, this
Terrifying.
is no good. But I think like in playing it more, my read of a lot of the events of this is that this is through like Ness's lens of how things are happening, which like doesn't hold up the whole time because like some physical things happen that I'm like, okay, so did like that actually happen towards the end of the game, or like was that a real thing that went on? But a lot of how I see the events are just like, this is a kid making sense out of weird things that are happening to him, and that like what you're being presented to in the game is just that interpretation. It's Ness's interpretation, which is like very fun and cool. I just recently watched Over the Garden Wall again, and like
classic,
very, very good. And I feel like there is so much like kid logic in that show of just like how things work and like how people act around each other, like when they show up to like the motel and shit like that, and like everybody has a job. Here's the people who say what their job is and shit like that. Like that kind of stuff. It feels in line with some of the stuff that happens in Earthbound. And I think the cool thing about Over the Garden Wall is that you see like eventually what like reality looks like. Yeah. And like how the two characters were like misinterpreting real things that were happening. Like, God, I can never remember the kid's name. The Elijah Wood's character.
Elijah Wood, yeah.
Yeah. How like he thought everybody like hated him or like nobody liked him. And like you see all these events of like everybody's like, oh, what's up, dude? Like we were just talking about you. We're so happy you're here. Or like the like nerdy, very not cool guy that he thinks is going to like hit on his girlfriend and take his girlfriend. And it's like he just couldn't be farther from the truth. Like all that kind of stuff is very helpful to see that like we shouldn't necessarily trust what we're seeing all the time here. And that I think played a big part into the interpretation of like what's going on in Earthbound of like, did they go to an alternate world where like you warp around by talking to dudes, or like, are they really beating up like zombies or anything like that? Or like, I named him something different, but like, did Pooh really come down off of a mountain to like help these kids or whatever? Yeah. So I think that was most of what it was. And the dad stuff, God, the whole time I was just like, where the fuck are you, dude? Like, go home. Hang out with your kids. Like, why are you so far away all the time? Like, just this like absent father figure sending his kid money to be like, you should take a break, dude. But like, oh, well, I'm just your dad. And like all that sort of stuff. Or I think you had brought this up when you had talked about it, Tori, of like the relationship that Ness has with his mom, and like all these moments where he's like suffering physical damage from missing his mom. And like the way that you solve that is by calling her. I'm like, God damn, dude, that is wild.
Dude, that hurt me a year ago, and that hurts me infinitely more now.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm like, oh.
It's painful.
I remember like as a teenager playing Earthbound, and Earthbound for the first time for what it's for what it's worth. And like when you would get that note, because like you've touched on it, but like for people who aren't familiar, there is literally a status effect in this game that is homesickness, and like it just pops up sometimes.
Only be cured by calling your mom.
Yeah, and it's like it's just an invisible counter. It is just a dice roll that is happening behind the scenes that ticks up with a higher probability the distance of time you are from the last time you called your mom from like a payphone in game. And I remember as a kid, like I didn't realize that like calling her would solve it. So like once I gained the ability to like teleport, I would physically go home. And like, because it's like a lot of other RPGs. It's like the Pokemon games. You know, when you visit your mom and she's just like, you fast travel home, you visit your mom and she's like, oh, it's so good to see you. Why don't you take a nap? And like you go home in Earthbound and you see your mom and she's like, go ahead, go sleep at your bed. I'll make you dinner. And then like, I don't know, like we were talking before about so many video games, just like you can break them down to just like the sheer numbers, but there's something so fucking special about that game. And I think part of it comes from the fact that like Shigesato Itoi, the director of the game, was like not a games guy. He came from like different creative disciplines, and those games they just rip my fucking heart out. Like, not just because there is some really like capital S sad shit that happens in those games, but like they capture this like poignant nostalgia in a way that at least when I played the first Earthbound, like nothing had to that point. Like playing it as a teenager, like I got to the end of that game and I cried. And I remember like
I also cried.
I had never cried playing a video game before. And like when we played it a year, like within the last year, like I cried when I beat it again too. It's like there's just something so affecting about those games.
They also save those big punches for right at the end of the game.
Yeah.
90% of Earthbound is like, look at all this weird shit. There's a guy that comes down from the ceiling and takes a picture of you every now and then. Aren't these people kooky and weird? And then, just the last 10%, they're like, no, we're going to fuck you up now.
Yeah.
This is the part where, we're going to actually punch you. It's wild. The ending of that game really, really hits.
Yeah, and it's cool because it's like, not to be all like, oh, children used to have it so good, but like I think children's media in a lot of ways really, at least popular children's media, like I know there is still obviously children's media that does this, but like popular children's media used to like really challenge kids and still like make them experience complicated emotions. Like I think a lot about like the Amblin like 80s stuff, which like I obviously wasn't alive for, but like my dad was a dork, so like I was watching I was watching E.T. and I was watching that kind of shit when I was a kid. Yeah. So it's like that's the kind of stuff that like it respected the children watching it enough to still let them experience complex emotions and still let them like feel hurt watching things with the knowledge that like you're in a safe place where you can experience these complex emotions and like you can cry and you can hug your parents or you can hug whoever because it's just a movie and it's okay. And like Earthbound and the Mother games really feel like that, where it's like this is a safe space where we're gonna let you feel some rough shit, but like we're gonna let you feel comfortable first and we're gonna make sure you feel okay. Whereas like I don't know, like the Mario movie didn't do that. It was just like
the closest approximation I can have to that is like Inside Out.
Yeah,
like, I think Inside Out is close to that. I took my little cousin to Inside Out when it came out, and like it's kind of like all the emotions are very one dimensional, but it shows like Riley like is shitty to her parents sometimes because she's 12 and she just moved to a new place. And like her parents still love her even when she's a jerk to her parents. But then there's like really sad stuff like when she forgets Bong Bong and he like fucking dies forever.
This shit's fucked.
God, like
I was just talking about how fucked up that is. Like to my wife, because like I think the worst thing about that scene is that he like looks down at his feet like evaporating and like essentially
he's like Tidus in Final Fantasy X.
I was just about to say he's in the sending ceremony and he knows he's dying and he's like, okay, I'm not going to make it out of here, so I can at least help her. And he's like happy and joyful and like stoked that she finally gets out. Fuck you, Bing Bong, whatever your name was. I can't handle that shit. Yeah. I'm like 30. I'm 32.
Yeah, I know. And the next one's coming out. And in the next one, she has anxiety. Like they get to introduce mental illnesses, I guess, next time. Yeah. Like, God, I'm not ready for this.
No, absolutely not.
I wonder if my mental illness is just a little guy. I wish I could talk to him.
Yeah.
Be like, cool off, dude.
Yeah. Could we like just chill for a second? I would love to like take a plane ride and that be a normal thing that I can just do without having to like medicate myself. That would be so awesome.
Yeah.
Ay. Anyway, Earthbound was really good. I want to bring it up again, but just like wanted to talk to people who I knew also liked Earthbound.
I'm glad to hear you enjoyed it. I'm really glad to hear you enjoyed it, especially since like, I mean, I could talk for another hour about Earthbound and I won't, but like, talk about generational differences. Like it's really interesting to me to hear that like, this is a game that you like organically tried as a kid. Whereas like for me, my only exposure to the series was like Ness is a guy in Super Smash Brothers. And I wanted to have like,
me too.
I wanted to have an encyclopedic understanding of where all the Super Smash Brothers characters came from, and also this came right at the time when like I was really delving into like SNES emulation and N64 emulation to kind of like fill the gaps of things that I didn't know from my own childhood. And so like trying to play emulated Earthbound on like the family laptop when I was in 8th grade, and then eventually playing it on cartridge when I was like 14. And so it's really neat to hear that like it's a game that you tried, bounced off of, and then eventually returned to and really loved. And just like your nephew Tori, who discovered Mario through the Mario movie, like all roads lead back to this kind of stuff. It's just a matter of how we get there, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah, video games. Typically something that we do in this part of the episode is that we talk about a Podtimistic thing, which is just something that you're vibing on right now. And again, guest rights. If either of you want to go first, feel free.
Yeah, you've been thinking about this all day.
I was like at my job, just like sitting at work thinking like, what's my Podtimistic thing going to be later? But I think I settled on it, and I think this will dovetail nicely into like the discussion we're about to have about Onimusha.
Yeah.
I think my Podtimistic thing for the week is remastered video games that let you experience the game, not just how the developers want you to remember it, but how the experience actually was. And like,
totally.
not to dip too much into the Onimusha discussion, but like before I eventually played this game on the Nintendo Switch, as I know the two of us did, all three of us did for this discussion. But before I did that, I went to my local video game store and I called them up and I was like, do you guys have a copy of Onimusha for the PS2? And they were like, yeah, we do. And then I drove by and picked it up, and nobody asked why I was so interested in playing Onimusha, which kind of upset me. And so I came home and I started playing it, and I was like, oh, this game has tank controls. Like it had, so I played like the first 30 minutes on my PS2 and then I switched to the Switch after that. And one of the interesting things about it is that like the Switch version, if you use the joystick, lets you use just like normal 3D movement controls. And then the D-pad buttons on the Joy-Cons let you do the original tank controls. Whereas in the PS2 version, the joysticks don't do shit. You are stuck with tank controls. And like, I thought it was just really special that like that is a game that was intended to be played with tank controls. Like it was clearly built for a D-pad movement. But like I thought it was really cool that they not only let me experience it in a way that like ostensibly had a better quality of life than the original one, but also like was how the game originally played. And I think so many remakes, like I just saw earlier today that like Resident Evil 4 remake is like up for Game of the Year at the Game Awards this year. And like one of the things I heard a lot about that game, which I did not play, was that like it helped people play that game and see it in a way that they remembered playing it in the 2000s for the first time. And I think there is definitely space for that kind of a remake. Like I think that's really cool. But also I think since gaming is a medium that historically has like really bad archiving and like a very, very bad institutional memory, I think it's really cool when remakes from companies, like big companies that would stand to put out a more polished product, are just like, this is how this PS2 game played, you know?
Yeah, no, 100%. I also like when games factor in just like, maybe you don't want it to be quite as shitty as it was, but you can play it like that if you want to.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of the, I played through, the original Final Fantasy VII a couple of years ago on Switch, and then also played through Final Fantasy IX on Switch as well. And I don't remember if 9 has it. I think they do, but there's a couple of like options that you can use on those games where it makes battling like significantly faster than it normally is. Or you can have like, I have my ultimate gauge always charged, or I heal 9,999 damage every time, or something like that, right? Which is kind of a similar tact to like, here we recognize what the cruft of this game was in the beginning, which for Final Fantasy games is like grinding and having to backtrack and do all these random battles and shit like that. And you can make that a lot easier on yourself if you want to, which I like love because I love those games a lot, but it is kind of challenging to be like, okay, I do want to see the end of this game, but like, do I have 60 hours for a game made in 1998?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I could just play Persona 4 again and that would be like amazing. Or I can grind for 40 hours in this other one. So it's really nice to be able to like experience that stuff without having to deal with the pain of the time.
Yeah, it's actually in a similar vein. Like when you play Earthbound on the Switch, there's like that rewind feature of Switch Online games, which like at first I felt like I was cheating. I was like, oh, I died and I rewound and then I made a different choice. But I'm also like, this makes me less annoyed at the game. So like, you know, it's not cheating. It's fine. In a similar vein, so like my family is really big on Christmas lists. Like my family is very like I'm learning that this is very unusual. So growing up, we were told like after Halloween, stop buying things for yourself. It's Christmas time. So if a game came out after like Halloween, like, sorry, bud, like you better put it on your Christmas list. And I also come from a family, this is another thing that plays into this. I also come from a family with a lot of December and January birthdays, which I think is why my parents were so like, do not fucking buy yourself anything.
You're going to blow it. Yeah.
Yeah, because they had not one, but two things to buy. Both my brother and I have close to Christmas birthdays. So they were like, stop it. So this is extended into adulthood. Now I have a nephew with a December birthday. My dad also has a December birthday. It's never ending. And so I had to submit my Christmas list as a 24-year-old adult.
Hell yeah.
And I am realizing that every game I asked for on my Christmas list is a remake or a port.
Hell yeah.
And I actually really like that. So for context, I asked for Super Mario RPG, the Final Fantasy Pixel like collection, and the Metal Gear Solid collection, all for Switch, I believe. And I think it's so cool that a lot of those games I wasn't like able to legally access for a long time, and I get to just have all of those games on the Switch for like that's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
My Podtimistic thing, I guess, is like how the Switch has become the like console of archiving old games for the most part.
Real quick, I want to share, this is not really, I guess in a way this is about archiving old games, but I was at a wedding this past weekend from when we're recording this for one of my partner's cousins, and like she has a handful of cousins, and like all of them were at this wedding, and I've met all of them at least once at this point, and there's a few of them that like we've joked that you meet people sometimes when they're like 18 and it just does not seem like they have fully formed brains, and it like it's you joke about it, but it's like they don't have fully formed brains, and then you meet them again when they're in like their early or mid 20s, and it's like you're a human being now that I can like carry on a conversation with. And so like her youngest cousin is kind of at that point now. Like I was able to interact with him in a way that like the last time I saw him, like I just didn't really talk to him, and part of that is that he was 21 now and kind of drunk, so like we were having like a longer conversation than like we literally ever had. And there was a moment where it was like midnight, he had to get up early the next morning, and so he was leaving the after party, and so he like went to like give me a hug and say like, hey, it was nice talking to you, and he looked down and I was wearing my denim jacket which has a foxhound patch on the one arm, and like this is somebody who like all of our conversations had been about like family stuff, or like him telling me I just had rum for the first time and I thought it was pretty good. And then he sees my foxhound patch and he was like, I like your patch. And I was like, thanks. And I had a split second where I was like, does he think I'm in like a right-wing militia or something? And then he was like, he was like, which one's your favorite? And I was like, MGS2 is probably my favorite. And he was like, oh man, I haven't gotten that one yet, but I've played 3 and 5. And I was like, I just had like this tender moment with like my partner's cousin who like before this day I had only exchanged like maybe 15 words with over just like video game paraphernalia. And like I know that if I was too young to be playing MGS3 on the PlayStation 2, this kid who turned 21 a week before this wedding definitely was too young to be playing MGS3 on the PS2. So yeah, I'm with you, Tori. Like it's really special that it's like we can bond over these games no matter like where we played them, and even if the ports are subpar sometimes, like I've heard those MGS ports are, it is still at least like opening the door for people to experience this kind of stuff.
Fuck yeah, video games.
Video games are so cool.
Real quick, I want to share my Podtimistic thing this week.
Please.
Which is, it's a good parry, everybody. A good parry in a video game. There's just nothing quite like it. And in the game that we're going to talk about here in a second, there's a very good parry. Like the screen like flashes like anime white for a second. Yeah. Samanosuke moves like the speed of light and comes around somebody and just like cuts them in half. It's a one-hit kill. Amazing. That always feels just so good. Great parries in a lot of games. I feel like Bloodborne comes to mind for a good parry. Any of the Dark Souls games, they all get great parries.
Metroid Dread also.
Yes, yeah, totally true. The that one, and I think Samus Returns I think had one too, where she kind of like whips her arm up and that like parries people. Good as hell. Really, really good. Which, hey, why don't we talk about the main game that we came here to talk about, shall we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So, Onimusha.
Yes, this fucking video game. Also, hey, welcome to Good Games. It's a segment where we talk about the okayest games of yesteryear and gush all the things that we love about them. Tori, a thing that happens a lot of the time is that I jump scare David with this segment. We'll usually sit around and talk for a little while. I kind of like being on the receiving end of being jump scared by my own segment.
You're like, oh.
Let's talk about this fucking video game.
Can I just say that, like, as somebody who really enjoys video game podtimism as a podcast, it feels really special to to hear, hey, it's Good Games, and like I'm ready to talk about a good game. I'm ready to talk about the okayest game that I played this week.
Yes, it's exciting, and I will say that this one's probably on the farther end of the scale of games that like are actually kind of good, but like a good B. For the game that we're talking about today.
Yeah, I kept having a thought as I was playing this game.
Yeah.
Which was that like we have games that are great and we have games that are bad. And we have games that were supposed to be really good but then ended up being mid, which is kind of like the worst of them all.
It's tough, yeah.
And this game is like it strove to be a B and it was a B.
Yeah.
You're like, I really respect that. And I also don't think they make games like that anymore.
I don't think so. It's very much like it feels like kind of a mid-budget title where they were like, I don't know, let's make Resident Evil, but like in samurai time. Yeah.
And
let's see if that works.
I like how they play kind of fast and loose with some of the theming because I was expecting like Onimusha, okay, it's going to be like very feudal Japan, which it is, but there's also like a Frankenstein ass plot in the middle of it. And like, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing.
There's some earthworm gym looking ass enemies too. And you're like,
they really are.
Okay.
Talking about the Reynaldos.
Yeah. So
I really like knowing too that like this game was born out of like some of the guys who worked on Resident Evil being like,
yes, yeah.
You know what would be really cool, man, is if like Resident Evil but samurai. Like that's
but
where that is 100. That is not even joking. That is where this came
like,
from.
Yes, yeah.
Weed and Mountain Dew Code Red fueled idea.
Bro, it'd be so cool if it was ninja.
What if Claire Redfield had a samurai sword though?
Yeah. And it's
Let me set the stage for this discussion a little bit with a couple of hot stats about this video game, just so we can all be on the same part here.
The hot stats. Yeah.
Hot stats.
Okay, so Onimusha, this video game, came out January 25th of 2001 for the PlayStation 2. This was originally planned for the N64DD, standing for disk drive, which was this like short-lived Japan-only expansion for the N64 that like would let you use discs because they were like, man, I don't know if we can do this on cartridges and shit. And then for a moment moved on to being a PS2 game or a PS1 game, and then finally arriving and being like, okay, this is actually going to be a PlayStation 2 game, which just for context, the PS2 came out in North America in October of 2000. So that was like not that long after the console actually shipped that they put this game out too, which is bananas given some of the like graphical stuff that is going on in this game, but we'll get there. This was made, of course, by Capcom, who makes like thousands of video games. But I think the important stuff to note is that this was produced by Keiji Inafune, who's this like kind of legendary Capcom producer who did like most of the Mega Man games, like produced most of the Mega Man games. It was like the base version, X, Legends, my beloved Battle Network, and he also produced the Minish Cap and Resident Evil 4. It was also directed, I know, with the fucking lineup behind that dude.
That's a crazy ass lineup.
And then he made Mighty Number 9, which was a challenging video game. It was also directed by Jun Takeuchi, who like also worked on the Resident Evil games, and like you'll see a lot of the staff that was on the Resident Evil projects also on this one. So like there's clearly an influence from that game, and I think that's like obvious if you play it or have like seen a Resident Evil. I do have a review of this game by the outlet PSX Extreme, which is a
love that name,
which I was not familiar with. I took their review and ran it through Google Translate a number of times to mangle it and fuck it up real good to get like a nice artist's interpretation of what they thought about this game.
I'm so excited.
So I'll read that for you now. Ultimately, I wouldn't worry about what I was saying about buying Onimusha. Maybe the game will reach the 1 million mark sale in the US and eventually Japan. This is the truth. All players are encouraged to leave Onimusha as soon as possible. We recommend that you order this game immediately, now. If the Japanese version is any indication of the strength of the American version, it would definitely be a video game. I should also mention how much Capcom spent on Onimusha's marketing campaign, TV, print ads, online advertising, and even TV. We are sure that gamers of all genres, especially Resident Evil ones, will love this classic game for its stunning visuals and impressive Onimusha gameplay. So wait for Onimusha over, and the wait for Demon Might Sad now begins. And they gave that a 9 out of 10.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think that Demon Might Sad is a reference to Devil May Cry. I'm not positive about that, but that's my best guess.
I really like
Demon Might Sad. Wow, what a name.
They're really, they were right about one thing, and it's that this game does have Onimusha style gameplay.
It really does. Yeah, they deliver on that promise.
You know what's crazy? So Noah and I have talked extensively about how insanely fucking stacked 2001 was, as a year for games like Final Fantasy X and Eco and Halo and MGS2. This game also came out in 2001, and Devil May Cry also came out in 2001. And so it just keeps getting progressively more stacked. It's interesting because we're living through a year right now, 2023, where the discourse is the best year in gaming ? And we've had some great games. But 2001 managed to have 20 good games. And this year's had 10 good games. And we're best year in gaming of all time? I'm I don't know, man.
You see these years pop up every now and then where it's just how the fuck did this all come out in the same spot?
Yeah.
But also the commitment of how long it takes to make a video game was so much shorter at the time.
Yeah.
It's true.
You had people just running through video games I don't think this is going to take all that long. And that's not the rule. There are definitely situations where games took years and years and years and years to make. But the example of, and this isn't a good workplace, but the difference between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask coming out within what is it, a year or two of one another?
Yeah.
Of course, that sounds like there was an enormous amount of just terrible crunch, but it would be impossible for Nintendo to say hey, the sequel to Tears of the Kingdom is coming out next year. Everyone would be what the fuck happened? How is that? There's no world where that's the case.
Yeah.
And so just the investment of time, I think, was so much lower, especially for a game that it took us 4 or 5 hours to beat it.
Yeah. That's another thing that surprised me about this game is how short it was. When Chase posted that he'd beaten it in 3.5 hours, my first thought was oh, he speedran.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I was oh, Chase has probably played this game 300 times and knows all of the spots and speedrunner. But then I beat it in less than 5. So this actually genuinely is a short game. And I was thinking about this too, because imagine a game this short now. Imagine paying $70 for a PS5 game that can be total cover to cover story, basically platformed in 5 hours. I feel people would hate that. They'd be I spent $70 on this. I don't know. I mean, this is to say games have always been expensive relative to the currency of the time. I saw someone compared the price of certain N64 games in the 90s to now, and adjusted for inflation, some of those games are actually $80 and $23. James, games have never been cheap.
James has been so expensive forever.
Games have never been cheap, but I also feel we just don't have that type of tolerance for a game this short from a large publisher, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the reviews did call that out of being this is awfully short for a video game. And so I feel people talked about it at the time, but in hindsight, it's very bizarre. This is something that David and I talk about a lot because both of our appetites for long games is just so small. I don't really want to play a 100-hour game very often,
Oh man.
And so I'm sure, especially after you guys' Final Fantasy X experience, that was probably a salve.
Yeah, it was, but I was still oh my God, only 5 hours?
Quite short.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a bummer that games are so expensive. I would be remiss to say that not everything's that expensive. And it is cheaper on the Switch, I will say, but it does oftentimes get in the way of is this game good or not? It does often comes down to the balance of was this worth it like monetarily, which is challenging just because like the money oftentimes just like warps my brain of like, was that good? Or like, did I like that enough for it to be like, this amount of money?
Like a game you get on Black Friday at the eShop, if it kind of sucks, but you only paid $10 for it, you're like, that was a pretty good game. But if you bought that game full price, $70, you'd be like, this game fucking sucked. Like, I wasted money. Yeah.
And it's just like, it's a shitty relationship to have with media too, to be like, I have to get $60 worth out of this. Whereas like, I don't know, if I check out a book from the library and I don't like it that much, I'm just going to return it to the library. And it's like, no harm, no foul. But like, if I spend MSRP on a video game and I don't like it, that's like a lot of money that I'm not getting back unless I sell that bad boy on eBay.
And I think a lot of this, like a lot of things comes down to like I wish the game preservation was just better. Yeah. Because like if there was a library for video games that you could just like go check Onimusha out at, I bet our conversations about video games and about like the quality of them would change a little bit because it would just mean that games that are really new are kind of expensive and like, okay, that's fine. And like the longer that games go on, like the more somebody who is just getting into it would be like, hey, I've never played Persona 4. Like, let me go check that out from the library and check it out. Yeah. Versus like having to pay $60, $70 whole dollars on the Switch to be like, do I like this or not? Like maybe you don't like very good games about high school and the other world, but it complicates the situation. I wish games were just preserved better.
I wish they were too. But I'm glad that Onimusha was preserved enough that we could play it for this.
Yeah. Top level, just like how do y'all feel about this one?
It was fun. The combat took a little bit of getting used to because I need a dodge roll and there is not that. It really bothers me. That part really bothered me at first, but I was like, all right, this is the block and parry game I see. Or what I would do is when like a guy would swing a big sword, I would just run around and hit him in the butt,
Yeah.
So once I got into that, I was like, okay, I get this. And it was fun. I actually love the puzzle parts of this game. Yes, I love the treasure boxes where you have to like do the first row of numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Very fun. I love the puzzle. There was one part about this game that you never get to a frustrating part where you're like, I admire this. Like I'm yelling at the TV, but like I admire this.
You really committed to the bit.
And this part happens like somewhat early in the game. You and Kaide do this like back and forth puzzle sequence where you're like pulling levers to get to another room.
Yes.
And then you have an unskippable cutscene, and then you have to walk across these tiles where like the other tiles on the floor open up like trapdoors. Yeah. If you fall through, it's game over. You have to do the previous puzzle sequence and do the unskippable cutscene again, right? And it's not over. After you go through that room, you go like Samanosuke gets like Indiana Jones trapped in a room with like rising water, and you have exactly 3 minutes to solve this like puzzle by like moving
like a sliding
tiles on a wall. And like if you don't do it in 3 minutes, you get game over, and you have to do everything I just mentioned with all those unskippable cutscenes all over again. And I was in that hell for an hour, and I was like annoyed, but I was like, I fucking love this. Like it was like, it was a little masochistic of me. I was like, I love what they're doing here. And I eventually got through it after like attempt number 7 or whatever. Again, not something I think you would see it in the like. If Onimusha was made in 2023, there would be autosaves after every single time you entered a room. So like you would never have to do any of those puzzles a second time, you know? Like that's a unique brand of suffering that was necessary in the memory card save point era. And I have no choice but to respect.
It really built tension in that section.
Now, I was going to say, talk about stuff I really respected in this game. Like, the first time that you lose the ability to control badass samurai Samanosuke, who is wielding, like, the demon gauntlet that allows him to slurp up the souls of demons after they die so that he can upgrade shit. Like, you then take control of Kaide, this, like, badass ninja who does not have a gauntlet that lets her slurp up demon souls and is equipped with just like a knife and some kunai, and that's it. And I was really blown away the first time that happened by like the way it recontextualized like basic enemy encounters that I had kind of started to just like breeze through. Like now all of a sudden the weird zombie demons who move really slow and only took you like 4 hits to kill with Samanosuke take like 20 and take like a huge chunk of your health bar if you get hit, because Kaede is like not imbued with demonic power to help her beat these guys. And that was another one of those things that was like, it kept making me think of like all the reviews when the Spider-Man PS4 game came out, where people were like, I hate the Mary Jane segments. I hate the Mary Jane segments. And then like, I haven't played Spider-Man 2 yet, but I keep hearing that they kind of doubled down on them. And like, there are just as many of them. And like this time she has a gun ? Like,
it's like a taser that she gets.
That's awesome. But like, I think it's really ballsy that the game, so much of this game is like, you control a badass. You control this like really dope, cool guy who kills demons in a really neat way, and then like kind of rips that out from underneath you for like puzzle solving sequences. I kept thinking about like, what if like the PS2 God of War games did that? Like I can't even conceptualize that a little bit. Like I thought it was really cool.
They definitely have stuff that they want to do, and they're not going to compromise on that in this game. Like with the puzzle sections, with the Kaede sections, like you're going to play it. You don't have a choice. You don't have a skip this part of the game button. But I think it is aided by the fact that it is pretty short in that way, that like those sections are, 15, 20 minutes. They're not that long to begin with. And so it does allow you to feel less powerful for a moment and then be like, fuck yeah, dude, it's Samanosuke time. I got my swords back. Let's go. Which is really satisfying. It's like the same sort of feeling when in Breath of the Wild, when you go to that like island way off the main continent and it like takes all your items away.
Yeah.
And the challenge of it is to just like redo the loop of Breath of the Wild right at the beginning of the game, where it's like, I have nothing and I have to make this work. It's a similar sort of thing where it's like they induce a certain amount of powerlessness on you, which then like recontextualizes your relationship with the game all of a sudden, which is like cool. That's a cool move that they're able to do.
Yeah, it's like Kaede is kind of like hard mode. And they always bring her out at these moments when you've had enough time to upgrade your weapons or go through some sort of challenge. You're like, this game's easy. And then it's like Kaede time. Like she has I guess you can kind of block things, but she's like her defense. She's not wearing armor. She has a little dagger. It's just much harder to navigate. And also, like sometimes when you're Samanosuke, you get lucky if you like parry or like crit or whatever. And like if you kill them with one hit, if you soul suck, sometimes you get some HP out of that. And with Kaede, like you don't get that.
You don't.
But then like, so you're kind of on your own when it comes to healing, but also this game has limited healing items.
It's crazy.
And so there is times when I'm like, I don't want to waste a medicine on Kaede, but it's also like, okay, well, Kaede is like one hit away from dying. And I need to get her from point A to point B. And like, okay, I guess she has to take the herb or whatever. Like it sucks. And I got really good at just getting her to run around enemies. Because I was like, this medicine's for Samanosuke. And like I came to this area where you, after a long sequence of playing as Kaede, you switch over to Samanosuke. She like takes a boat over to like a particular part of the castle. And Samanosuke's in there, and then you switch to Samanosuke at whatever health you had him at previous. So like he could be fucking 80% dead, which was my case. And you face this boss who is like a giant insect lady. Who is like almost impossible to like hit physically unless she's like about to attack you.
Yeah, it's really hard.
And so it's moments like that where I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, Kaede. Like you're just gonna have to like cope. Like you cannot have this medicine. Because Samanosuke needs it. So it was just interesting moments of like rationing healing items between two almost dead characters and just like passing the baton.
Yes.
But it was fun.
I think it's like it's a interesting approach because in Resident Evil, which I'm also like a huge fan of, I haven't said it yet, but I played this when it came out and I loved this fucking video game. I was crazy about it.
Yeah.
But part of the balance of a Resident Evil game is the survival part of the survival horror, in that they give you some ammo and some healing items, and then you have to balance like, okay, do I have enough ammo to get through this section and like do the thing that I need to do, or do I need to just like run from these guys or anything like that? But in this game, like, ain't no ammo for a katana, man. Like, Samanosuke is gonna swing all the time. Like, he never stops. Constantly swinging. And they have to double down on the health being the thing that you have to like manage. And so I feel like you feel it pretty acutely in those moments where you're like, I got one herb and I'm about to fight like a boss. Like, this is tough. I really got to like figure out what to do here, which is, it can be cool. I suppose that can be frustrating, but I think it also helps that like there are parts of this game that are a little bit easier. So you kind of get like a break from those moments where you're like rationing the last leaf of an herb to heal yourself versus like just running through the same like mobs of guys and you know, getting all your souls and stuff.
I was really looking forward to this part of the conversation because like Chase, from listening to Podtimism, like I know you're really into Resident Evil, and Tori, I know that you haven't really played a ton of Resident Evil, but you've seen a lot of Resident Evil. The thing I came away from this game, and like full transparency, I made it to the final boss. I have not beaten the final boss. I will at some point, but I know you guys like beat him and I didn't quite clear him, but that's okay. I've made peace with that. Like, there were a lot of parts in this game that made me feel like a total badass as Samanosuke. And I was kind of under the impression that like the Resi games like don't really do that. Like, does this game stray from the survival horror, since like you don't have to worry about ammo, and since like Samanosuke can parry everything and is also like a badass samurai? Like, how does that translate over from Resident Evil?
Yeah, I think Resident Evil, a lot of those games exist on a scale in themselves of, and I talked about this when I played like most of the series last year, where all of them have a balance between horror and action, right? So Resident Evil 1 is like almost purely a survival horror game where it's like you are mostly just trying to survive and get from one thing to the next, especially the remake that came out on GameCube, where like they have emphasized the like fixed camera angle shit to such a degree where it's like they're constantly trying to make you feel afraid of like, look at this angle of Jill through this one broken window, and then you run down a hallway and it's like you're in the corner of the room and you can kind of see her just wandering down this like hallway, and it's intended to make it be like, wow, this place sucks, it's very scary, and like I should be fearful while I'm in here. A lot of like blind corners where you'll come around something and it'll just be like a zombie back there. Yeah. And in fact, the first encounter you have with a zombie in that game, you like come around a corner going left, and then you turn a corner going and see this zombie like eating some guy, and it's like a very famous Resident Evil scene where a zombie like turns his head and it's all spooky.
Yeah.
And the thing that you would probably naturally do as Jill is back up, right? Like just try and put some distance between you and the zombie. And if you do that, it changes the camera angle to where you can't see him anymore, which I realize can be kind of a frustrating experience. But I think what the game is doing really gracefully there is like showing you that it's not only the video game, but like the actual experience you're having is supposed to scare you and disorient you in a way that like really works for me. But the farther you go along in the series, the more that scale bends towards action. And especially by the time you get to Resident Evil 4, which is just like, it is scary and there are very frightening moments in that game, but it is mostly like a shooting game, you know? And I think they eventually, they turn into the dog that does catch the car with Resident Evil 6, where it's like, that's just a full blown shooter. And then they kind of get that reset with 7 where they go back to it being very scary, and you see a little bit that with Village too. But to answer your question a little bit more directly, I think this one is farther along that scale on the action parts of it, but they try to change how the horror is communicated. Yeah. I think a lot of the horror in Resident Evil games is like there's one shambling monster that is coming after you and you don't have the resources to fight it. A lot of the horror here is like a lot of this game takes place in like the daytime or in very well lit rooms. You just get to see like, wow, this place is fucked up, and there's a lot of like viscera and like monster stuff in here, or you know, like scary demon guys wandering around, or you can see, oh god, what's his name? Is it Gogan Dantis? No, Guildenstern, the like demon scientist who is like just a real hoot. I love this dude. If you listen to the English voiceover, he's just bananas.
He's hysterical, yeah.
I operated on and resurrected that pitiful Nobunaga after he was killed in Okihazuma. He then made a pact with the demons and pledged his eternal loyalty to serve us forever as our slave.
No!
Oh, yes, it is indeed true. Now, let me show you my most recent creation. Go, Renato! Bite the belly of that maggot and feast upon his bloody flesh!
And like wandering into a room with him, like the horror of it is like, this is like a very scary situation that I've been put into. But I think it does offer more power and like leverage against those situations by having Sam Inosuke being like tough and like kind of cool. He's like kind of cool. He's a kind of cool dude. He could have easily been like show an anime shitty kid, but he's like kind of quiet and like tough and like gets pissed and is like, let's just like beat these demons' ass. Like that's what's going to happen. So yeah, I think the balance of it is different than a Resident Evil game normally would be, but it is coded in the same kind of like aesthetic that a Resident Evil game would have for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, everything that Chase said. And also like it takes place in a different sort of time period than Resident Evil. Like that kind of goes without saying, but like Resident Evil has like a kind of modern day, or at least for the time, feel correct.
Yeah.
And this is kind of taking it back to like feudal Japan. And so the way people dress, the way people interact with each other, the fact that like afterward in the epilogue, spoilers, the princess goes like on a journey to see the world, and they lead these lives afterward. They're just like, I just go back to this village and then my castle falls and I just go to this other village instead of like, you have saved the president's daughter, you know, like
Raccoon City is nuked. That's the end of the video game.
It just goes back to being like, I am in my family's home and I am with my brother. Like, I think that's interesting. Like, what constitutes a happy ending? Also, the fact that Samanosuke, everyone being like, I don't know what happened to that guy, and it just like ends that way, and we're just like all supposed to be okay with that. And I think that's just very much like the fact that it's taking from Japanese mythology and legend. Like, he's just a legendary dude who became the Onimusha, went like fucking berserk and killed a demon, and like that's it. And we're all okay with that, you know? Whereas I feel like Resident Evil endings are more like buttoned up. So to speak.
They are. And they're so much more oriented towards like action too. I think like most of the Resident Evil games, like by the time you get to the end of those games, they're just like a different kind of video game. Like in the beginning, it's so much just like, I've got 3 bullets and a shambling horror coming down the hallway. And at the end, it's like, you have a rocket launcher that you need to shoot at a big bad guy. And that's the end of it.
I think an interesting holdover from that Resident Evil formula you guys are talking about is the fact that this game does the fixed camera angles too. Considering I largely found the fixed camera angles to just be a hurdle I had to overcome in this game.
Yeah.
And not really used in a way to like frame things other than like the occasional, like that first boss fight you have with like the big demon guy with the big axe and he can like knock you over with it. Like you're in a square stadium type room basically, and there's a circle thing in the middle, so you're kind of moving in a circle around this square, and there are like 4 different fixed camera angles, and the only reason for that really just felt like so that the camera was another obstacle you had to overcome. And it never really made me feel powerless, and it never really made me feel like scared. It was more just like, if I take 3 steps back that far, then it's going to be off camera, so I need to like bait him over here so that I can actually see him moving. But it's interesting to know that like the Resident Evil games were so much better about utilizing that fixed camera angle to like a interesting gameplay and storytelling degree.
Yeah, I like am kind of a pro fixed camera angle guy in the right circumstances. Because like, in this situation, it kind of doesn't make sense to have it here, because most of the time that I come around a corner and a dude hits me that I didn't see, my reaction is like, damn it. And then I just like kill him, you know, like it happens immediately, and it's almost like a mistake rather than like, oh my God, I didn't see the zombie behind that corner. I need to like turn right around and run away. And like you see that utilized too in like the very first scene of Silent Hill 1, where you're playing as Harry in Silent Hill 1, and like end up in Silent Hill and you're just like wandering through these streets and these alleys, and there's like this kind of just like droning sound that keeps getting louder and louder and louder, and you're going through these increasingly like terrifying alleyways, and at some point the camera angles start like fucking with you, where if you're running forward as Harry, it starts like looking at him front on, and the camera sort of like pulls back and up away from him. Whoa. And then twists the camera to like to see him down the hallway as he runs away, which like just adds to this like disorienting feeling of like, what the fuck is going on in this video game right now? Like I'm losing my touch on even the way that I expected the game to move in the first place.
Weird.
Whereas in action games, it's like, I kind of don't need that. Like that doesn't really add a lot to Sam Inosuke like beating ass, you know?
Yeah, that was the thing
with
it. It was just like, it didn't really do much in that way. It was just kind of like, I round the corner, and this is what I was touching on before with like, this is a game that was meant to be played with tank controls, because it does that tank control thing where like when the perspective shifts, you keep moving in the direction that you're holding the joystick. Like, so if you're pushing forward, when you cross over the threshold to a new camera angle, even if you're now coming towards the camera, as long as you keep holding forward, you're going to keep going the direction you intended to. Whereas like, and that makes sense to me if I'm thinking of it like a joystick or like a D-pad and I'm pressing up on it. But as a joystick, I had a harder time wrapping my head around that. And so I would do this thing a lot where like I would cross over to a new camera angle and then stop moving and then reorient myself and then keep moving. But I also just have like a lot less experience with these types of games with the fixed camera angles and the tank controls and that kind of thing.
Totally. What else about this video game? Just like total nonsense. I love to dress up in video games. I love it when a sword gets cooler when you level it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also love the armor. Oh my God.
It looks so sick.
The
it
armor you get
cool.
behind the waterfall. It's like holy armor. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was armor
goes
behind
so
the
hard.
waterfall?
This might be why Fortinbras is kicking your ass so hard.
Did you get the demon sword, Noah?
Is that the one you get from doing all of the like gauntlet, the gauntlet
Challenge.
run?
Yeah.
Yeah,
when
do that.
Gollum asks you to like go to the dark realm, he's like, "Oh, hello. Would you like to go to the dark realm?"
Nah, I did that a little bit, and I got the fucking in-game achievement that was like, you did it, you reached halfway, and then I kept dying, and I was like, fuck this, man, I don't need this demon sword. But I am at the final boss in the armor that I started the game in, so I'm now realizing that maybe I might have missed an item along the way, perhaps.
You missed two. There's the entry level armor, then there's like the second level armor, and then there's like holy armor.
Oh.
So like, yeah, you've missed like two different armors.
This game is probably hard as fuck for you. Noah.
That explains why the final boss had this move where he like picks you up and just like spits fire on you. And he did it to me one time when I had a full health bar and it killed me instantly. And I was like,
oh, that does kill you.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say
a few times.
Even still, like the fight before him with Marcellus, like he had some moves. He had some moves.
That
where,
Dark Souls ass fight. Yeah,
that was a Dark Souls ass fight. He would hit me twice and it would knock out half my health bar. So I was like, what am I doing here?
Gotta get some new armor, man.
That's what I was doing there. Yeah.
I love that all the like demon characters are just Hamlet characters.
Yeah, literally.
Fortinbras, Reynaldo, and Marcellus. Like, what the fuck are we doing?
What are we doing? Yeah. Talk about like mixing themes and mixing metaphors and shit. Like,
yeah. It doesn't serve a purpose. Like, there's no Hamlet in this video game.
Yeah, I just think whoever made this game just like really liked 10th grade English, and they were like, Frankenstein, Hamlet, and they're like, these are the only two books. And
I'm surprised Sam Inosuke didn't have like a big scarlet A that he was wearing around most of this game, just like cuz.
Yeah.
I will say, like, as somebody who has played a lot of video games that take place in or around this period of Japanese history, when I saw that opening cutscene, and like, let me tell you, that opening cutscene fucking ruled. Like, I watched it on the PS2.
It does.
And then I watched it again on the Switch, and I was really blown away by just how good it looked on my PS2. Like, hooked up with component cables to an HDMI TV. Like, I was blown away by how good that looked. Like, when they show Oda Nobunaga in the opening cutscene, I really thought that Oda Nobunaga was going to be like a bigger problem for me in this game. And then like he dies in the opening cutscene, and you're like, okay. And then you find out later that like the demons are trying to resurrect him, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
But like when you show me Nobunaga, like I just assume I'm gonna have to fight him at some point. And I understand that, like, you know, you circumvent that by beating the final boss of this game. But I just kind of saw him and I was like, oh, I know him from Pokemon Conquest, and and that I just never had to fight him.
Yeah, they really don't make you tussle with him until I think it's 3, or you might have to fight him in 2 as well. But I wonder if they had planned to make you fight him later, and they were just like, we got to ship this game, dude. Like, let's just make him fight a big, like, scary snake demon and have that be the end of the game. Because, like, yeah, you beat him, and then, like, Nobunaga's like, all right, well, fuck, I guess I'm out. And then just, like, doesn't resurrect.
I was going to ask, since you mentioned the second and third games, like, are the other games in the series good? Like, would you recommend playing them?
If you liked this one, you will like the other ones.
Cool.
At least 2 and 3. 3 gets very, very bizarre. 2 is like mostly kind of a similar deal with like, it's got a couple of characters that you play as. You play as this guy named Jubei, who's like a different character than Samanosuke. And a amazing enemy in the other game is this guy named Gogan Dantis, who's like the best swordsman that's ever lived. He's like this demon character. And like, if you play it under a modern lens, like you're expecting these two characters to kiss at like any moment. They're just constantly like, ooh, I'm the best one. You're the only person who's ever been able to best me and stuff like that. Like just constantly that feeling is happening, but it never happens, unfortunately. But anyway, the combat's still really fun. It's still really good. 3 does a little bit of a better job with the camera. You get a little bit more control over it. That one weirdly features Jean Reno as like one of the main characters that you can play as. And it swaps between timelines of feudal Japan and modern Paris as the places that you're playing in. It's like the Nobunaga's like lackeys are trying to go to the future to like fuck shit up.
Weird.
And you have to
this
deal
Assassin's
with that.
Creed?
It's a little Assassin's Creed. Yeah, Nobunaga gets in the Animus and is like, I'm going to go back and figure this out and make it good for all my demon bros.
So tying this to how we started this conversation.
Yeah.
Have you watched the Netflix show?
I have not watched the Netflix show. It looks pretty good, but I haven't checked it out. Did you?
I was curious about it, but no, I haven't watched it.
I watched the preview for it just because I was like curious, and it does look not related to this, other than the fact that like the main dude has the same gauntlet that like lets you absorb demon souls. But I'm curious. I wonder if it's any good because this is fun.
Yeah, this is fun.
This.
I really liked this.
Yeah,
I like this a lot.
It was a good palate cleanser. Yeah.
It's funny too because like my memory of this game is that like this is one of the couple of PlayStation 2 games that like I had that were M-rated that I had like occasional access to before I should have been playing M-rated games probably.
Before you were M-rated.
I was M-rated. Yeah, exactly. And like, don't get me wrong. I was playing M-rated games like long before I turned 17, but like I have this memory of like a couple of games that my dad had on the PS2 that he had like mostly gotten for himself, but like knew that I spent more time on the PS2 than him. And so like it would have been really complicated for him to hide those games from me. And that was like 007 Nightfire and this game. And I remember like, I want to say they were kept in like a different cabinet than the rest of the PS2 games were, but like I knew where they were. And they weren't like hidden from me. Like I knew where they were and he knew I knew where they were. And so like the memory that I had of this game before returning to it was like this was a mature game that like my dad had, and like, well, you can play it, but like it's kind of bloody and it might freak you out a little bit, you know? Now playing it, like it was very campy and silly in a way that I understand that like an adult seeing a like 8-year-old, 7-year-old wanting to play this would be like, there's a lot of blood and guts and stuff, but playing it as an adult, just like, this is really silly.
Yes. No, it reads a lot more ridiculous playing it through this time. Like all the dialogue between Samanosuke and any of the demons is always just so ridiculous. And like it does have that aesthetic of being kind of frightening, but and I remember at the time when I played this when it came out, so I was like 10, 11, and like even then I was like this ain't that bad. Yeah. This is fine. In a way that like I played Silent Hill 2 that next year and was like absolutely fucking not. I can't handle this in the slightest. Like the difference between a Onimusha M and a Silent Hill 2 M is like as big as the ocean. It is so different as far as like how actually mature something is. But just like the presence of blood does seem like it's going to be bad, but Nah, man, this one's got Guildenstern in it. It's fine.
It's a really special period of video games where it was like mature games are games that have silly blood in them, and they're also the scariest thing you've ever seen in your life.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think I've mentioned this before on the show, but like the first time I played Resident Evil, I was a little bit younger, but like I genuinely thought zombies were going to come like fuck up my house. Like I was so scared.
Oh my God.
And like it just couldn't be further from the reality anymore.
Yeah.
Like you play Resident Evil 1, you're like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever seen.
It's really funny.
It kind of reminds me of like Fatal Frame. Is another series of this era that my brother had, and like there's just something really freaky about like the ghosts, and like there's this one lady who, like, one of the premises of Fatal Frame, if I remember correctly, is like there are all these spirits who are kind of like unsent ghosts who are just like bitter about their lives and like wandering around in this area, and you take pictures of them. And there was one girl who I guess was like tortured before she died, because you like took a picture of her and you like heard her. And she was put into this like she had to put on like a mask, and the mask gouged her eyes out because it had spikes on the inside. And she's like, my eyes, and she has like gouged out eyes and shit. And like I'm sure that is silly. I'm sure it is like that. She looks like a Muppet or whatever. But like as a kid, that was terrifying.
Yes. Now we played one of the Fatal Frame games a couple of years ago for the show, and like it is, some of the voice acting specifically is kind of goofy, but I think there is a pretty big stark difference in just like the content stuff like that, where there can be something scary of like, isn't a zombie spooky to maybe get bitten, but like gouging your eyes out is pretty scary.
Yeah, I think
even as an
horror,
adult. Yeah. Whereas like these big like Earthworm Jim looking guys, like it's not that scary. It's okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. Do we have anything else to say about Onimusha? Any final thoughts here?
I don't think so. This was a good game. I really enjoyed playing it. I'm glad I returned to this one, and I don't know. I think it's very easy, like you guys said, to kind of reduce Capcom nowadays, especially since Keiji Inafune is not around anymore, to just like a couple of good things that come out every now and then. And especially since like they lean hard on that Resident Evil shit nowadays. But like Capcom used to just be pumping out bangers, and they used to be like really true. Inventing interesting stuff in the PS2 space, and taking things from one series and iterating on them in an interesting way. And I'm really happy that I discovered that this is like such a neat series.
Yeah, it's very cool. I think there are definitely parts of it that don't age as well as something else, from this era. But like, if you can deal with the fixed camera angle stuff, it is a little bit, I think it is a pretty fun experience. Yeah. Even, I'm biased. I was crazy about these games.
Yeah.
But there's something to love in there for sure. I suspect that if you tried to like emulate 2 or something, that might be kind of challenging, because it will force you to play with tank controls, if I remember correctly. But 3's good. You can play with an analog stick on 3, pretty sure.
Damn.
Nice.
Anyway, gaming.
Video games. They're so fucking cool.
They're so cool. Hello gamers, it's me, Chase, and I'm here to guide you through the outro. If you want to interact with us at all on the internet, you can do that at podtimism.com. There's links to all of our shit there. And you can join a Discord and come talk to us there too. Let me see what else before I open the floor to the two of you. Actually, fuck all that. Thanks to The Worst Garbage for having us on the network, and thank you, Scott Wilkinson, for making our podcast art, and also thank you, listener, for listening to the show. You do us a great service by listening here, because there's a million podcasts, but you chose this one today. So thank you for doing that. Tori and Noah, where can people find you on the internet if you want them to find you? And what other stuff would you like people to check out after they listen to this episode?
You can find me on Twitter at Tori_as_always, and on Blue Sky at ToriDP98 at bluesky.social. And you should check out our latest episode about Final Fantasy X. I think that's a pretty good one.
I can vouch for that one. It was very good.
Meanwhile, I don't mind if you find me. I'm on Twitter, Noah_Hertz, spelled HURTS. Our podcast, Press Start, the Gen Z video game news / I don't think variety show really works as well for ours, but like it's kind of all over the place. Like sometimes we talk about books we read. Sometimes we get to the end of the show and we go, hey, what have you been playing? And we don't mention a single video game. And that's the
good shit.
That's
man.
that good shit. You can find more stuff about our podcast on our social media. We're on Twitter as well, press_start_pod. We're also on Tumblr and Blue Sky, press-start-pod. And I don't know, if you find yourself really interested in emailing us before listening to the show, you could also email us at heypressstart@gmail.com. But other than that, yeah, I think I speak for both of us when I say that we can't thank you enough for having us. This was very, very fun.
Yeah, totally.
You've spoken praises about our show, so I want to take the opportunity to say that one thing I really love about y'all's show is just like, and I know that is like literally on the box, but like just how pleasant it is. It's always so optimistic. Mm-hmm. You guys always manage to find something positive to say about even the middest games of all time. And hell yeah. I think that's a really lovely way of looking at everything.
Yeah, I feel like with the general state of the world, it's really, I feel like it is easier to kind of like stare down the barrel sometimes and be like, Jesus, totally. Everything is terrible. But finding the silver lining is the harder thing. Everything was terrible, but like Ninja for the PS2 was kind of fun, wasn't it?
It's fucking, there was parts of it that banged, man. Blinks the cat, not a very good game, but damn, that cat do be cute. I think that was actually the takeaway from Blinks the cat.
Yeah.
We played that. Design of Blinks was pretty good. Thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, bye gamers.
Bye gamers.
TWG, the worst garbage, online.